we had various questions on the pasuk when it says, different questions about the expression and the language used in the pasuk. It says in the singular that you will go out, and then talks about the enemies in plural. So we answered that the singular means the idea of the Yidden being ba'achdus, in a state of unity. When they go out to war against the Nefesh Bahamis, there's the idea of saying beforehand, before davening, which is a time when we go into battle with Nefesh Bahamis, there has to be the idea of Avas Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael. And Oivecha, the enemies, are plural because that's the difference between the Yidden and Esav, which symbolizes Klippa and everything not Jewish. That in things that are not Jewish, there's the idea of multiplicity. There are things that are in multiples and various in levels, and that's why by Esav, where it was only 6 souls, it says plural souls. By Yaakov, it was 70, it says soul, Shivim Nefesh in the singular, because that's the level of the difference between Kiseitzel and Milchama versus that's the way it is by a Yid versus the way it is the enemies of Yiddishkeit. And then there's the idea of going, he said earlier, the idea of Seitzel and Milchama is about going out, that one fights the negative. He goes out of his limitations, out of his boundaries, even though davening and in general Avodas Hashem is something that involves certain amount of progression level by level, but it has the full force of being in the presence of Hashem. So therefore, it's a way of going completely out of oneself. That's the time of, primarily the time of davening. So now he's going to continue in this idea of the going out to war should be upon your enemies. So he says in Ois Daled, 3rd page of the printouts, because of the pasuk continues, he says that when you go out to war upon your enemies, instead of saying with your enemies or against your enemies, it says upon, over, on your enemies. Though there is an existence of the enemy, there's the idea of the enemies in plural. They have a level of multiplicity. Because there's an enemy, there's a need for a war. To such a degree that the war that's in davening is in the way of work. Davening is called the service of the heart. So the service, when we use the word avoida, the Rebbe is going to emphasize that shows that it's something that's very difficult, it's very hard. He says, Shulash and Ibud Oidis, it's from the expression of working, the Alter Rebbe explains that the word avoida is when you're working and on heights, when you're transforming and changing heights and turning them into parchment. So it's a lot of effort. Avoida kasha. The same thing, avoida shabalev. The idea that davening is called the service of the heart. It doesn't just mean service as in like an easy type of service. I hand you something, but it really involves a deep, essential type of transformation of the person's self, and therefore is something that's considered a difficult avoid. Still in all, the way how he's going out to war is in a way that it's upon your enemies, higher than your enemies. This means it's not in such a way that when he's fighting his enemy over here, when he's overcoming those the Bahamis, etc., it's not considered that the one who he is fighting is on the same level as he is. He knows initially that he's higher, incomparably so, from your enemies. And this very knowledge that he knows that he's in a position that's higher than his enemies, That itself affects the victory in the war in a more elevated and easier fashion than if you would not be aware of it. Because if a person knows that when they are going out to war, they are already higher and more powerful than the enemy, that gives them the strength and the light-footedness and the courage, etc., to accomplish what they have to accomplish. Similar to what Chassidim bring down, that when soldiers go out to war, they go out with a joyous march, because that is uplifting and that gives them the courage to overcome, etc. And now we go back to one of the other questions we asked. It says Kiseitse in the singular, so we explained the singulars because of Ahavas Yisrael. Al L'Milchama, for a war, upon your enemies. Then it says V'nisonai Hashem Elokecha b'yadecha, that Hashem shall place Him in your hands. We just finished saying that they're called Oivecha in the plural because they don't have the level of Achdus Yisrael, not like by us that we have. We preface our davening with our Ein Mekabel, and we daven with a minyan, etc., which shows on the unity and the joining of many together. But in addition, so why are we talking about the singular of the nations being placed in our hands? That Hashem shall place him in your hands, in your hand. Even the son, it says, shall place him in the singular, though they're your enemies. In the plural, there is no need to fight with every single enemy individually and alone. This is a very important point that he makes over here. As kulam ke'echad, it's in such a manner that Hashem places in the hands of the Yidden all of them as one. He gives them over to the Yid in the singular. It's as if Hashem made it that all these multiple people are really one. How does that take place? So he's going to give an example from what we find that a miracle took place with the war in Sichon before the Yidden went into Eretz Yisrael. Similar to what we find by the war against Sichon. Hashem said, why should I make my children have the trouble and burden of besieging every single city to go from city to city? He put it in the minds and hearts of all the soldiers to leave the city, their cities, their different towns, and they all gathered to one place to fight against the Yid. And over there they were defeated. And from there, afterwards, the Yid went in and took over the different cities till they conquered 60 cities. So that is the idea of being a singular enemy. That Hashem makes sure that it's not multiple fights that the Yidden have to go through. He just gives them all at once into the Yidden's conquest. The Chag of Sukkot is similar to as we find the Haftarah of Sukkot concerning the war and battle of Gog and Magog, that I will gather all the nations to Yerushalayim for wars. In other words, they'll all be in one place to get rid of them all at once, instead of being in every nation in their own land. That is one explanation of why it says, when the son that I will place him, I will just make that singular one instead of I will place them in your hands. Another explanation for this is top of page 153. The fact that it says I will place him in the singular, it's talking about your enemy that enemy, that nation that you are battling in war, may have hundreds and thousands of troops, but it's only one route above. It says, after the splitting of the sea, that Yidden saw Mitzrayim dead upon the ocean shore. Why does it say mace al Sfasayam? Why does it say singular in the word mace? It should have said mesim, that they are died, that there are corpses, or mesu, they died. It should have said a word that indicates the plural. So over there, what does it say over there? That it was mace in the singular. So he says, because the Yidden saw how Hashem defeated and took care of the officer, the minister, the source of Mitzrayim above in the spiritual realms. According to this, we can explain also what it says. Upon your enemies, in a higher level than your enemies, the koi al shor sham l'mayla. It's referring to the root above. So the Rebbe is now working backwards. After explaining Alevecha means that you're going in such a way that you're higher than your enemies. We were talking about your physical enemies. And then we explained the Nesani B'yadecha means the Eibusher gives all the many different people that you're fighting as if they're one person. Now that he explained the Nesani B'yadecha in the singular, is referring not so much to the armies down here, but the source of the klippa above, the sari above, the root of the klippa above. So then, this is even a bigger chiddush, that the Yidden are al oivecha, upon and higher than your enemies, not just concerning the nations down here in this world, that Yidden are higher than the nations of this world, but the Yidden are higher even than the level of the source of the nations above. And he's going to explain the Chiddush, because what we're dealing with is the level of Makif. That is the Makif of the, in the Ketores. There were 11 spices, and one of the spices was Levoina, and it's brought down in Chassidus, Shua Makif Shola Esther Kisrin de Misavusa. It is the Makif, the Levoina spice that's in the Ketores of the 11, symbolizes the other 10, symbolize the 10 crowns of Tumah, of Klippa, and the Levoina symbolizes that level of Makif, the transcendent level, the level that's beyond Klippa, that gives Chayis to it. And that's why there's the number 11, because in Klippa, the Makif is removed, and the Chayis of the Klippa, which is Kedusha, is removed from the 10 spheres of Klippa. Shaydei ha-Makif hazeh. Nimsh klem Chayis, through this Makif, which is called, he called it the Makif of the Levoina spice. So the Klippa gets the Chayis. So now, when the Eibishter brings a Yid higher even than the Makif level of Levoina, higher than the Makif, the Chayis, the source where Klippas get their Chayis from. So then, when you have that, the idea of the war in a way that's upon your enemies, to affect the refinement of the level that's upon and higher than your enemies, meaning our job is to deal with the source, with the makif level of the Levoina. That's also why it says he will place him in your hands, and not them. It's dependent upon the makif, because of this everything is dependent. If you have the makif of the klippa, so automatically the rest of them fall by the wayside. And the Rebbe explains in the avodah of davening as well. The point of davening is to transform and deal with the Nefesh Bahamis and overcome all the limitations that Nefesh Bahamis has that it places upon us and so on. So he says, after we give him this level of makiv, shuv eidet tzarich lisasek bebirur protein yonim the machshava dibra ma'isa. So then one does not have to concern themselves and be engaged and involved with refining the details of thought, speech, and deed. Why don't you have to deal with the thought, speech, and deed of klippa? Because they become repaired automatically. So just like in the physical army of the goy, if you deal with the makif, with their source above, with the sori shel Esav, like it says, or the sori shel Mitzrayim that they saw was dead upon the bank of the Yamsuf, the similar vein internally, when person is given over the makif of klippa, so automatically all the other negative things of klippa, machshava dibra ma'isa, are also taken care of as well automatically. So that's and then when you go higher than your enemies, meaning the emphasis is you got to reach a level higher than the enemies down here. You got to reach a level of the makif. You reach the level of the makif, and that's Hashem's promised us. Then we will get even the makif in your hands, and then you don't have to worry about the battle down here because you've dealt with the spiritual level above. Any questions before we go on to the next paragraph?
Yeah, what did we say? I think yesterday.
On the 4th page, Messiahim b'shavisa shivya. We asked earlier in the Maimer, why does it say you will capture his captive? First of all, it's a double expression. You will capture people. What does it mean you capture captives? And what does it mean that it's his captives? It seems to indicate that they were captives already when they were his. Usually when you go out and you capture people from the enemy, those are people of the enemy that weren't captive until you went out and captured them. Why do you say b'shavisa shivyoi? You are capturing his captives as if this was captive by him, and you are capturing them from them. So he says, because referring to the service and work in the world and refining the sparks, that we refine also those matters that were in captivity of your enemies. Meaning, klippas have the godly sparks in them in a way of captivity. And we are freedom fighters. We are releasing them. We are doing pidyon shvuim. We are capturing the captives, meaning we are taking those sparks that are in captivity by the klippas and we are releasing them. Now the question is, how did klippas get it in the first place? The possibility for this initially, how could it even be possible that the klippas have these sparks in captivity? It's only for the advantage that comes about through the service of a person. That it shouldn't be bread of shame, because if a person would not have to fight to release those sparks, so then it would be an easygoing type of matter. It wouldn't be something that would involve effort. If it wouldn't involve effort, so then the reward we would get would be bread of shame, because we're getting it unearned. Al-Adra, but just the opposite. We need to work for it, according to the suffering. That is the reward. So because of the great work that we have to do in releasing these sparks, because of this, the reward is greater. Now, Bepashtus, we were talking about davening earlier. So then he said, okay, davening is to lead you to the avoid of the birur hanitzotzes in the world. When you leave davening, when you leave the Beis Medrash, when you leave shul and you go out into the world. But now he's going to say, in davening, there are parts that reflect this idea of releasing the sparks that are trapped in klip. Avoid is Hatfila Gufen, the avoid of davening itself, in Nefilas Apayim Shalach Sheshem and Esra. It's the idea of Nefilas Apayim that follows Shemin Esra, Shuan Inyam Mesiras Nefesh Avoid Sabirudim. It's the idea of self-sacrifice for the sake of elevating the sparks. That is the idea of the Nefilas. That's the idea of Nefilas Apayim. That he's totally has the complete bittul. It's a higher bittul we spoke about in the previous mimer than Shemin Esra, because he completely loses himself over there and is falling on his face, and that is the Mesiras Nefesh necessary to be able to cause the elevation of the sparks. In the footnote, he says there's missing here a piece of the of what the Rebbe said in the rest of the mimer. So now when I say the Rebbe is going to connect this with Chodesh El, all this is specifically connected with the month of Elul. The idea of the month of Elul is, I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. So here the Rebbe inserts in the brackets a very interesting point. In general, and we know we spoke about this in one of the Mamorim previously, Anila Doidi is talking about during Elul. That's when I am approaching the king in the field and so on. Doidi Li, that my beloved is to me, that Hashem embraces us and hugs us and so on. That's during the month of Tishrei, specifically during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Says the Rebbe that Anila Doidi and Doidi Li follow each other, and in the same word. Behind this means Sha'avoida Anila Doidi Pe'elas, the avoid of I am to my beloved effects should take it from me out immediately. Like the pasuk said, Ad Mehera Yoretz Dvari, that very fast his words shall rush. That should be the idea of Doidi Li. In other words, you don't have to wait till Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. As soon as I have the Anila Doidi of the month of El, boom, I have the Doidi Li immediately following that, immediately in direct connection to it. That's another answer for the question that Rebbe asks in many places. If Doidi Li is talking about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, why is it hinted in the Rosh Tevis of El? It should be only El, should be only Al, not Elul. Why is the Doidi Li have anything to do with El? Because in truth, because the immediacy of it, as soon as I have the Anila Doidi, immediately follows up on that the Doidi Li. So he says, the idea of Anila Doidi with Doidi Li, that's the content of the avoid of davening. In other words, just like in the beginning of the Maimer, we said, is talking about the avoid of davening, where I take on the war with the Nefesh Bahamis, Becharbi Bekashti Betzloisi Beusi, that's talking about davening. So the same thing, Anila Doidi with Doidi Li, the idea of the service of love to Hashem, that is the avoid of davening. Until the ultimate level of davening, it's hinted in what it says in the continuation of the parsha, that over there, after it speaks about taking the captive, the beautiful captive, after it says that she shall cry a month of days, like explain this for him, that this month is going on. The month of Elul, that's the crying, what the Neshama is crying out for Hashem. Top of the last page, that's a chodesh of accounting for the past year. It's preparation for the coming year. As a result of what is the final part of the whole story? So it says that you will come to her and you will you will unite with her. You will be intimate with her. What is that idea of Tavi Allah Ba'alta Beruchni is that he's coming together. I know Inyan Mesiras Nefesh, the idea of the self-sacrifice. Inyan Nefilas Apayim. It's also the idea of the falling on the face, the level of that level of the Bir on its Tzaitzis. He says that's the ultimate union of Hashem with the Eibishter, then of Yidin with the Eibishter, that's to be found also in the Mesiras Nefesh, and the idea of falling on one's face, etc. during davening. If we're talking about taking this in the broad sense of the month of El, When is the time of Nefilus Apayim, the ultimate level of Mesiris Nefesh? That's the state that a Yid finds himself during the Ilah of Yom Kippur, that he says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and he has to have in mind as if he's ready to give up and willing to give up his life for Hashem. Followed on the heels of that, the ultimate connection with Hashem, the Tavi Elo Balto, is by Shana Rabba Ushmini Atzeres. She'az Nasa Yichud Yisrael v'Kutshabrichu Ba'if and the Yisrael Malta B'Chidoi, then becomes the union and the mating of Yidden and the Eibishter in a way that Yidden and their king are the only ones there. That there only be you alone and there's no one else with you. Until they become like one flesh. That is the ultimate union that it says that on Shmini Atzeres it says instead of being brought the 70 bullocks, which is the whole Yom Tov, it's only one brought on Shmini Atzeres, but it's only Hashem and the Yidden. That's the ultimate union, the Tavi Lo Ba'alt. From this we come to what it says. And it'll be when you'll come to the land. Next week's parsha, this is also connected with what it says that she will cry. Because the idea of entering Eretz Yisrael has to do with tears, the Rebbe says. This is the advantage that says when Mashiach comes, they will come with tears. It's not a crying that's connected with unwanted, untoward things, negative things. Because the negative becomes totally nullified until they become totally transformed to good. Like it says, Hashem did not want to listen to Bilam, and Hashem, your God, transformed for you the curse to blessing. But rather, instead of the crying, the bachsa esavia vesima, and the crying that Eden will enter at Yisrael in the way of crying, that's a crying of joy. Like it says, those that sow and plant with tears will harvest with song. It says, he is going on and crying, carrying the load of seed. He returns with joy carrying his bundles of wheat. It's describing how it's going to be Mashiach's times. By the time you finish planting the field and you're going back, returning the ways, you're already gathering up the sheaves of wheat. Then we fulfilled the mitzvah of Bikurim from the best, the first of all the fruits of the land, like it speaks about at the beginning of Parshas Kisavik. From the 7 species that Eretz Yisrael was praised with. Since we receive all the best of the land, both physically and also spiritually. So it should be to us close in our way of closeness, in the true and complete redemption soon, actually.